The Hussein Obama campaign and other liberal Democrat talking heads rightly criticized the Bush administration for runaway spending over the last 8 years. Hussein Obama promised a net cut in spending during the campaign, so one would figure that cutting spending would be a top priority. We all remember the brouhaha when Vice President Cheney said deficits don't matter. Deficits do matter, as well as the percentage of GDP that they come in at. Apparently, Hussein Obama is endorsing Dick Cheney. Deficits don't matter anymore. Excuse me. Hussein Obama is sending Congress a budget Thursday that projects the government's deficit for this year will soar to, sit down, $1.75 trillion, reflecting efforts to pull the nation out of a deep recession and a severe financial crisis. Obama's budget overview will call for between $3.5 trillion and $4 trillion in spending in fiscal year 2010 and creates space for up to $750 billion in additional handouts, bank bailout funds this year, money that hasn't been requested and the administration hopes will not be necessary, to stabilize the still reeling financial system. But wait, there's more. Page 14 of the President's fiscal year 2010 budget blueprint contains a section called Fiscal Irresponsibility that deserves scrutiny. And it says this: another manifestation of irresponsibility is the large budget deficits we are inheriting. Okay, keep that in mind. These deficits over time will harm economic growth. Okay, he says budget deficits are irresponsible and they harm economic growth. And they impose burdens on our children and grandchildren. Between 2000 and 2008, real government outlays increased at a 3.6 annual average rate, 3 times the 1.2% annual average rate between 92 and 2000, because Clinton and the Republicans actually controlled spending. Furthermore, the amount of debt held by the public has nearly doubled to $6.4 trillion from 2001 to 2008. We are now living with the fallout of this deep fiscal irresponsibility. Unfortunately, we are also inheriting the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression, and that's BS. We'll get to that some other time, which will force us to increase deficit spending temporarily as we try to jumpstart economic growth. Time out. The administration accurately states that federal spending and debt have increased at a detrimental pace this decade. Then it says we're in the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. Hussein Obama blames massive deficit spending for a problem and then doubles down on Bush's deficit spending. Then we have this nugget from a guy who doesn't pay his taxes but wants to raise yours. Treasury Secretary and tax evader Timothy Geithner hailed what he called a remarkably fiscally responsible budget that will add almost $4 trillion to the national debt over the next 4 years. Just 4 years. Imagine if you spent like that. Get the credit card out, apply for 4 or 5 more credit cards, and just run them suckers up. According to the budget released by the Hussein Obama administration last Thursday, the federal deficit will total more than $1 trillion in 2009 and 2010, before dropping to a modest $912 billion in 2011, and then reaching a plateau at approximately $500 billion from 2012 to 2019. As it stands, Hussein Obama's maiden budget contemplates adding $6.9 trillion to the national debt over the next decade, continuing the same failed policies of the last 8 years, $3.7 trillion of which will be added during Hussein Obama's first term. Currently, the total national debt is $10.9 trillion. I guess deficit spending doesn't matter, folks, but it did the last 8 years. Gee, I wonder what changed. Obama is also going to add to the already massive government payrolls, which exploded under Bush as well. And considering that federal spending in 2000 was only $1.79 trillion, we can see how large it is. This is also projected to be the largest deficit as a percentage of GDP since 1945. Deficits don't matter anymore. You look at his own words. He says these massive deficits have harmed economic growth. So what's he do? He doubles down on that because he thinks it'll bring us out of this economic malaise. Now, if that was true, Bush would have had the greatest economy ever because he spent like a drunken sailor and he ran up massive deficits. Yet Obama's first deficit is going to outdo any deficit Bush had in any one fiscal year. So you have to scratch your head and wonder, does he think everybody's as dumb as he is.